felt it would give us the best access to the strongest possible group of senior insurance decision makers.
Insurtech Insights is a must-do conference, I think, for the network that is built here.
Welcome everyone. Welcome to this panel around the messy middle of mobility, assessing liability and coverage for the future of motor. My name is Guillaume Roux. I'm head of business development at Qover. And before we get started, I would like to introduce our 4 panelists today and give them a chance to introduce themselves. So maybe let's start with over there, Ralf-Peter, if you want to start.
Thank you for the introduction. My name is Ralf-Peter Schäfer. I'm heading product for traffic and travel information. Is it working now? Yeah, no, it's better. So, hello again. Ralf-Peter Schäfer is my name. I'm heading product for traffic and travel information at TomTom, based in Berlin in Germany. And I'm leading a team working on all aspects of live services for navigation, but also for location analytics in different verticals, including smart cities, Insurtech, retail, all location questions you can answer if you have a lot of data, what we have.
Thank you. I'm Alex Wyard. I'm the Director of Technical Underwriting for Allianz Personal Lines here in the UK.
Hi, I'm Phil Norris, Chief Product Innovation Officer for Aioi Nissan Dowa. Ironically, not Nissan, because we're also Toyota Insurance. My job is around future strategy, AI, being ready for autonomous vehicles.
Hi, I'm Chris Graville, so I'm the Legal Director for insurance at Uber, covering APAC, EMEA, and Latin America. I'm based out of Dubai, so great to meet you guys.
Thank you. Well, let's get started with the first question I would like each of you to answer, which is, what is the messy middle of mobility and why is it messy? Chris, do you want to start?
Yeah, thank you. I think from my perspective, it's like any industry where you've got fundamental change. That's when it creates a transition period. For me, in this one, if you remove the at-fault driver, which has been around for decades and decades, then clearly we get into some very sort of tricky kind of legal questions and practical questions as we transition.
Yeah, I think the problem's middle, because middle indicates a single point. It's an expanse of time where everyone will be right for a period until we've all agreed actually what is right, and that's where there's conflict. So that covers insurance, technology, obviously the consumer. So that's why it's messy at the moment.
I absolutely agree with that. I think this is about an evolution to an unknown end point, and actually arguably will never end, in terms of the way that we choose to live our lives, the way that society will evolve, and actually the way that we choose to move around and interact with each other. So it's messy because it's unknown. And actually what we'll be talking a lot about today is how do you bring certainty in an uncertain world, which is very difficult.
We are in the beginning of a technology revolution, right? The discipline of automation and mobility is very young compared to the history of driving as a human being. And it means we have to do what the perception model and the action and the ownership of a driver, we have to translate in a technology stack, which is very complex. And all the corner cases we have to train in our models, which is a challenge on its own. And we are very young doing this already, only for a few years now.
All right, let's maybe start with deep diving into the insurance product. Alex, I'm coming to you. I think autonomous vehicles are a good example of how insurance products needs to evolve. But when we talk about insurance for AVs, what are we talking about? Is it motor insurance, liability, product liability, cyber insurance? What is it exactly?
I mean, it's everything, really, in lots of ways. I mean, I would start by saying, as an industry, we can be incredibly proud of how we've evolved and met changing needs over the years. We're an age-old industry that has grown and evolved. And so from that perspective, I have a lot of confidence that we'll find solutions. I think sometimes, though, defining the problem is the challenge. So right now, we are offering personal lines and commercial products for evolving vehicle technology. So there is some autonomous assisted technology fitted to vehicles right now, and that there are products in place that meet those end customers' needs. I think the challenge comes when legislation catches up, perhaps driverless vehicles become much more prevalent, and perhaps the technology is more able to be used more widely. That's when we have to start thinking about the transfer of liability, products liability coverage, and actually how end consumers become much more aware of what they need. Because I think in a commercial space, a fleet product, you've got a little bit more opportunity to speak to one subject matter expert about what they're buying and help inform them via a broker. Whereas I think for personal lines customers, actually we need to be linking in perhaps more with vehicle manufacturers and building market-wide solutions to cover that transfer of liability and potentially plug that gap that might occur in customer knowledge.
All right. Chris, from your perspective, how should AV stakeholders look and approach at insurance? And are we going into somehow a direction where there is umbrella insurance covering everyone from car manufacturers to mobility platforms?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's exactly where we're going. I mean, if you draw a parallel with like contractors, all risk contractors insurance in construction, there's a reason why that was put in place, is because it got kind of complicated, and trying to figure out liability and where the risk is allocated was difficult. So you buy a policy that covers everything. Alex has just kind of mentioned all the sort of new and sort of emerging risks that are happening here. So you combine that with a number of players in deployment of autonomous vehicles. You've got the owner, the fleet operator could be the same, might not be the same. You've then got the manufacturer, and you've got the software provider. So you can have like 3, 4, 5, 6 different parties involved in this. Trying to figure out between each of those parties where risk should go and how claims are handled, things like that, I think is very tricky. And right now in the market, I know that Uber launched a few weeks ago what they call a wrap policy to address all of the things that Alex is talking about, which is one policy, all the parties are insured under that policy. So there's absolute clarity that there's no gaps in cover or anything. Everyone's insured. And I think that's exactly where we're going to go with this stuff.
All right, thanks. Phil, you're already insuring quite a lot of autonomous vehicles. So the question is, how do you price for this risk when there is no human involved into driving the vehicles?
So we've done quite a lot of testing. So this is not under the Toyota guise, but perhaps I'll answer that question as far as the direction of the future. A human not being in the car is not just an AV thing as far as looking at the technology. We've got a big history in telematics. Telematics moved the thinking away from historic averages to actual live data. So this is happening across the piece. So connected data becomes more and more important. Cars are crashing less, and they will continue to do so. They will talk to each other. So the role of the human gets smaller and smaller anyway. So it's not an AV thing. This move towards live, accurate data is going to be even more important. It's not just in the automotive space. Look at the health space. Life insurance was based on your age. There's much more to it now, the blood tests and everything. The data is much more important in the underwriting. So connected data will become much more important than the human averages of the past.
All right, as we're talking about data, Ralf-Peter, when it comes to data, how concretely it can help insurers in identifying driving risk and pricing for coverages?
Yeah, by default, autonomous driving is, at a first glance, a lot of hardware and software in the car to screen the environment and optimize the actors of the car. But then we come into play. We can give a lot of extra content and data which expand the horizon of the car, what the sensors itself doesn't see, because it's more far away, it's not visible, and there's a mapping. Mapping is important. It's not only a map to navigate from A to B. We call it an ADAS, a high-definition map with all the attributes, which is lane level, pavement condition, density, curvature, speed restriction. All that is relevant to have also a mid- and long-term horizon where the car can even proactive change the gears, the pace when something happened. And on top, there are a lot of dynamic data. TomTom has access to a lot of OEM data in the UK or in Europe, US. On about one of 5 cars, we have real-time data, and it's the ground to screen the environment, not only from the speed, but also if there's a hazard, is there's weather relevance, which dictates visibility changes and needs to know by the car. A lot of data where we can help to build and understand risk and acting fast to change anything on the actors in the car.
All right. Now let's talk about money. Alex, what is the risk of insuring autonomous vehicle? Is it a lower risk, a higher risk? Is it more expensive, less expensive?
Well, I think in terms of what we currently see, so that there's obviously, as I said before, there's a lot of kit fitted to cars already, which when grouped together with a software push could make that vehicle level 3+ autonomous. We know that kit can be expensive to repair in your claim centres and to calibrate appropriately. So the cost of a claim, even unrelated to the technology on that car, but a bump on a gatepost could be more expensive. But as has already been stated, that the frequency of those sorts of bumps will go down, assuming that technology is fitted correctly. One of the challenges of the messy middle is that people can still turn off some of those features, which is great, because then you're paying to repair them, but you're not getting any of the benefit of people using them. That's a slight aside. So we're in this period now where sometimes it's going to feel more expensive to insure these cars, but almost because we're not getting the most benefit from them. How that will drive through the market more widely, I think very much depends on the type of risk you're looking at, which seems obvious, but actually a fully autonomous vehicle being used plainside in Gatwick Airport is a completely different risk to a level 3+ vehicle doing the school run in central London. And actually the technology on those vehicles might be quite similar, but being used in a very different way. What I would hope is that as the industry evolves, the products evolve to actually keep them affordable for end customers for the bits of cover that customers will still need. So somebody is still going to have to insure against the theft risk of vehicles, for example. But actually we start thinking about that peril-led product build a bit more to make sure that the right areas of coverage are in place for customers. So it's not really a more expensive, less expensive. I think it's genuinely an evolution of products and price.
All right, let's continue talking about data. So, Phil, is there a gap between the actual risk of autonomous vehicle and the risk perceived by the public? And if it is the case, is data a way to bridge that gap?
So, technology arrives sporadically, but it takes time to be adopted. There is always that lag. You've seen the photos of the shift between horse-drawn carriage and cars, the same image, sort of 2-3 years apart. You've seen the same things at the inauguration of the presidents and the popes, where there's cameras, suddenly it's all phones. So it is a speed of understanding and acceptance of this. You've probably heard it's not hard to build a car that drives better than the average human, and if you're a motor insurer, there's a lot of really good cases of half of our drivers are less than average. So there is a real improvement to be had there, and the use of the data, as I've talked about, is being really valuable. It's about how quickly it becomes understood. And I think we've got, as an insurer, we've got sort of probably 3 areas where we can really influence. So one of which is to hold the manufacturers to account. So you've seen this situation in the Middle East now. Why are the boats not moving? Because the insurers have said no. So we do have a powerful position. If we're not happy with the technology, we can say no. The flip side of that is that we can be an enabler to this whole technology. We work very closely with Toyota, so it puts us in a great position there. The second thing is the regulators do need our help. A regulator from the Middle East, the Far East, came and spent some time with us trying to understand our experience so they could write their rules, really understanding what our insurers want. And the third thing is we do have an education role. What's acceptable and what's not takes time and it takes information. Not so long ago, if I'd have been smoking next to you, it'd have been fine, but now it's socially unacceptable. Perhaps not in parts of Eastern Europe, but certainly in this country and other Western countries. That's changed in recent time. It's become normal not to do it. At some point, you will see someone driving a car and see it as a risk. And that's to do with the evolution of an acceptance of the facts, because the data will prove that that's safer.
I just want to jump in as well. I think a lot of it's, I think there's one aspect's data. I think the other thing's just about human emotion and experience, to be honest. I took a level 4 in Abu Dhabi a few weeks ago, and for the first minute, I was nervous, and seeing a steering wheel turn on its own, I was really nervous. After a minute, I was relaxed, and I just got the phone out and did some work emails, literally. So I think...
Do you think the steering wheel being there helps or hinders?
At the start, hindered, definitely, yeah. It just looked like there was a ghost
I think
there, right?
Once the steering wheel's gone, it's a different thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the more people experience it, they'll adopt it quite quickly. But I think it is down to actually trying it first, because people don't like change, right? And they feel safe with a human in there, whereas actually all the stats say that makes it more dangerous, not less dangerous. So I think that's an important aspect as well.
All right, let's move away from autonomous vehicles. The future of mobility seems to be very tied to a broader ecosystem. So one question for you, Ralf-Peter. How do you look at smart cities and how it will impact and drive changes into the insurance ecosystem?
So smart city is a topic I'm also dealing for quite some years, beside the navigation systems we're building in TomTom for 20 plus years. There's a huge opportunity. Smart city in itself is about a change management towards a better modal split. That means you want to create an equilibrium between different modes of transport, having less cars on the road, or at least little congestion. And if cities tackle this challenge, there's an impact, there's a positive impact. On one side, if you bring the modal split in a better equilibrium, more people using also bikes and transit, you have impact on congestion, fuel consumption, CO2, noise, etc. And then the other aspect, in a time of electrification, many cities allowing only cars which are electric into the car or having higher taxation. So the change from combustion engine to electrification has also positive impact on noise, emission, and also health. And health positive impact means also is a relevance for an insurance company, right? And then the whole topic of automation. There's also another news. I believe if it is consequently applied, autonomous vehicles in the city can lead to a lower number of cars, because if you have more car sharing models, because it's a car, normally a private car is parking 95% of the lifetime. So there's an opportunity also for smart cities and have an impact. But means also you have to insure less cars in this model.
All right. I mean, with data, there is obviously a lot of data generated by connected and autonomous vehicles. And the reality is that insureds have now access to as much data as insurers. So my question to you, Chris, as a mobility platform, is there some kind of temptation for mobility platforms to start insourcing risk management and potentially risk carrying as you have access to all this data?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, data's king. You're absolutely right. Traditionally, it'll be the insurance company that has what we call the black box of data. And that means they can underwrite, they can price, they can adjust cover as they need. I think given this change, the data will probably be with the fleet partners or the owners. It'll be within the ecosystem as opposed to with insurers. There's definitely a temptation for platforms and other players to actually self-insure a lot of this risk. And you can see it in the market now. I mean, Tesla's got their own insurance company. Amazon with Zoox are self-insuring. Waymo are doing a lot of more self-insurance. So it's definitely a shift and a temptation to, take some of that potential underwriting profit in-house for sure.
All right. Let's maybe now look at the impact of... You wanted to say something, Phil? No? All right, sorry. Maybe let's now look at the overall impact on the insurance industry. With connected, autonomous, shared vehicles, what are the impacts and the cultural changes which are needed within insurers? It's a question for you, Alex.
So I said it when we talked first, that actually I genuinely believe that the insurance industry is very capable of evolution and change. If you look across our history and the kind of risks that are being written, I think that there are a couple of shifts that are needed. I think the clarity of the use of data. So I agree, there is potentially a challenge that some platforms will look to self-insure, but I think ultimately there is a need for a standardization of data across the use of these vehicles, not least because establishing liability is more than just insurance. It's important for law enforcement in the event of an accident. It's important for customer certainty when they're thinking about the contracts they've entered into. So in terms of the culture of how data is consumed, that there needs to be that ecosystem. There needs to be a true understanding of where the data is stored, how it's accessed, and how it's used, and that needs to be clear, sort of end to end. I think in terms of culture, I think there is a real need for innovation across the industry in terms of products, in terms of solutions, much more collaborative partnerships. I think that's definitely starting, but that needs to continue. I think whilst it is tempting for platforms to self-insure, you can't underestimate the amount of experience there is in the insurance industry tackling complex problems and delivering on behalf of customers. When you sell a promise, which is what we do, you have to deliver on it time and again, and that is genuinely what the UK insurance market, the worldwide insurance market does, and we're held to incredibly high standards for that reason. So I think that the culture is there. It's the continuing to champion innovation and change and almost not be afraid, and not be afraid that when the first crash comes, because it will, there isn't an overreaction. You know, the headlines write themselves, the consumer confidence can disappear really quickly, and we as an industry need to be thought leaders. We need to be prepared to stand up and say, are we comfortable with this technology and are we prepared to back it? Because that's the thing that will allow these vehicles to go mainstream.
All right. Talking about changes in the industry, Phil, do you see that there is potential impacts on the way insurance is distributed and that we are going towards a model of more and more embedded insurance?
So I think it's even more fundamental than that, and it's wider than insurance. So if we look at the traditional motor insurance policy is made up of something you have to have, motor third-party liability, and something you choose to have, casco. Depending on the country, it can be combined. So comprehensive motor insurance, that's the great majority of our products in the UK. If you go to Italy, buying casco is seen as unusual. So less than 10% of cars will actually have own damage. But with the move towards autonomous vehicles, what happens to MTPL? Part of that starts to be taken by the manufacturer, so it definitely shrinks. It becomes part of the warranty, and the insurer then sits in a different place. He sits behind the OEM rather than the customer. If you look at casco, as I said, is own damage. So you're insuring it if you own that car and you're responsible for things in that area. I believe autonomous vehicles will not be owned by individuals. They'll be used. It will become a service. And so that decision will be made by larger entities, not on a car-by-car basis, but on a fleet basis. And fleets tend to self-insure casco because of the VAT benefit and the self-insurance thing we've spoken about. So you're looking at a very different situation where cars aren't bought, therefore they're not insured, therefore they're not funded, and therefore you don't have dealers in the same way, you don't have finance companies in the same way, you don't have aggregators in the same way. But that's some time away, and that is between now and during the messy middle. So it's just how long that time will be.
All right, it won't be an insurance panel if we don't talk about regulators. So, Chris, maybe one question to you. How do you see the role of the regulators and how can they help for the future of mobility and the future of insurance?
Yeah, I think the regulator's role is really important. Aside from just making sure sort of safety is top of mind, licensing rules are really in place, I think there's probably two things. One's like allocation of liability is like a key question. And I think data is the other thing. Alex just touched on it earlier on. I think just making sure there are rules around what data should be disclosed and when, and that's at every kind of stage of the process, particularly at the claim stage. I think in terms of liability, it'd be really helpful to say who's liable. It looks like we're moving from the traditional model potentially towards the actual software provider, because if you remove the driver, it has to be the software that's usually at fault in an accident, right? I think when you look at the regulators across the world, the really advanced ones are like the UK, Germany, China, Japan, and some of the states in the US. What's really interesting in the UK regulation, it actually says once that autonomous function's engaged, it is a software provider that is primarily liable. That's really helpful, because what that means is for a claimant or the court, it's like you go to one person, and then they have to figure out the rest after that.
All right, let's wrap up this panel with one question I will ask to each of you. So in 3 to 10 years, what will define the new standard for motor insurance? Who wants to go first? Ralf-Peter?
Yeah, I think when we look how fast technology is evolving, and we're talking now about agentic AI and the potential, right? When you look to the middle of the mess, we have, as an insurance company, you have to train different models for the risk, understanding of risk of driver, but also of an autonomous vehicle, which is very different. In a classic car, risk is also evolving by human behavior, right? Overspeeding, playing with a smartphone, all these risks, which are going away in a world of automation, which is good. But on the other hand side, you need to train the model very differently with the environment condition, the actors, the corner cases of driving. When you look to the few rare cases of crashes of autopilot functions in the recent years, that are all corner cases, but you didn't train, right? So those models will win when they can utilize the massive amount of data now arriving from the car in the cloud, which we're seeing also as TomTom, that you train the corner cases. And your agentic AI should be adaptive like a human being, right? The old classic model, ML, you train and you have it. But the new world is adaptive, like a brain. You learn in the loop and improve day by day. And those models will win the race.
So I think that the next sort of 3 to 10 years is a little bit too soon, in my mind, to be thinking about fully autonomous vehicles being mainstream in the kind of consumer market. When you think about the cost of those vehicles, it's going to be prohibitive for most people, even if there is a manufacturer who starts making them en masse. And so actually, I think the key to successful insurance provision is getting set for when it is there. So we've got to really make the most of our data and make the most of our experience on everything that we have now. So all the kit that's fitted to these vehicles, all understand which manufacturers are doing things really well, understand how customers are interacting with that technology, really creating the thought leadership within our businesses, really making sure we're getting set with those partnerships and their products, and actually lobbying to make sure there is clarity in the legal and regulatory space, and that we're backing the industry as a whole to make sure we're ready. Because I think it's going to be very easy for our boards to pretend this isn't happening. It's going to be easy to say, oh, you know what, it's only 0.5% of the market, 1% of the market, 5% of the market. But a little bit like EVs did, suddenly you have to be there. And if you're data flows, your products, even your repair networks aren't set up to receive these vehicles, you're on a losing battle. So it feels like devoting a bit of time over the next 10 years to really getting set up for this will create an excellent space for the market in a decade's time.
Yeah, I just really add to that, you know, who's successful in the next 3 to 10 years are the people who do today's business well. So that's where your money will come from. But those that aren't doing well won't have any money or time to think about the future. And those that do well should put that time and money aside, because now is the time to train to be ready. Because that pivot point, it's difficult to predict when it will be.
Yeah, I think from an auto insurance perspective, it will gradually transition to other kind of risks, and it'll be things like cyber and product liability. I think there'll just be a gradual kind of, that will become more important, and the policies will adapt to that.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much. We have some time for a couple of questions which were asked by the audience. So there is 2 questions coming back around the concept of umbrella policy. And the question is, given it covers all parties, who underwrites the policies, personal lines, specialty insurers, captives? And there is a similar question around, if it's an umbrella policy, who pays for it and how the premium is split? I don't know who wants to take it first.
I can take the latter part in terms of who pays for it. I mean, it'll be a cost of each deployment, right? So you'll have to just allocate it between the different parties. I'm sure there'll be discussions saying, look, more of the risk sits with you, therefore you pay more premium, but that's a commercial discussion.
So, you know, we have done some research in this area. We understand the current different types of insurance that are involved, and the move towards product liability, errors and omissions, D&O coming into all of this. You know, we as a business are going through an interesting journey. So there's 2 halves to our business. We are really complex. We were 6 insurers down to 2 insurers. We're about to become 1 insurer. So MS and AD. MS is corporate, AD is automotive. So we have an opportunity to look across what all the different risks are required in order to try and build this policy. But, you know, culturally, what would be normal is probably some sort of wrapped policy that will evolve out of the back of this, and that will be driven by regulation and us coming to the party. The volume isn't there to do that, but that's what I think you'll start seeing, people experimenting with that wrapped policy once the regulation defines where the liability sits.
I think there can be a bit of a tendency to try and make new innovative things fit in our existing businesses and getting obsessed with, is it commercial, is it personal? The reality is it doesn't matter. For each organisation, it might be different. Somebody will have some capacity to provide to underwrite this product, and somebody needs to get it done and sign the paper. And that sounds very flippant, but it will come down to who is able to get it on their systems, who has the right expertise to create the wordings, who has the right contacts to build the partnerships to do the deal. At the end of the day, most organisations, that might be a blend of people, because this is something new. And getting a little bit comfortable with crossing that line and doing things a bit differently is important when we're thinking about completely new risks and completely new models of insurance.
I think regulations is also about what I allow as a minimum status quo, right? In a city, it's a different ecosystem for fully autonomous driving as on a motorway, and here also a lot of data arriving, we can create a consent. What is really the minimum standard to allow, as a mass phenomena, autonomous driving and autopilot function? And this is also good to regulate. Don't go for the most you can do. That's as a corner case. It's about what, as a mass, from a mass market, you can regulate with a good consent of safety.
All right, thanks. I think there is another question around claims, and coming back to your point earlier, Alex, around customer turning off some functionalities on the car and the ADAS equipment. So the question is, how do we distinguish claims caused by automation tech failures versus those by humans, drivers' errors, or turning off some of the features?
So for those of you that are aware of a current claims process, almost the first thing you do when you get a car into a repair centre is you plug that car in and you look at the data and you understand what technology was engaged. I think the crucial thing as an industry that we need to sort out is that access to data to establish liability in a way that is fully credible across all parties involved. Obviously, our garage is downloading data. At the moment, there's no question about shift of liability, and therefore we're doing it for our own purposes to understand what's happened with that vehicle. I think there's a massive piece here about customer education. I have sat in too many meetings now with people saying, oh yeah, I just picked up my new car and it kept beeping at me, so I turned the functionality off. Because inherently we all believe we're good drivers. We wouldn't do it if we didn't think we were. We all think we're quite good drivers and we think the machine is wrong. And so there's this real piece around how do we make sure that the end users of these vehicles recognise that the vehicle knows best. And it comes down to trust. People don't trust machines as much as they trust people. And they don't forgive machines the way they forgive people. And so we've got a huge education piece and a huge piece there to do to make sure that when these vehicles start to become more prevalent, they are trusted. But I also think it would just be great if people couldn't turn off some of those features.
Yeah, just coming on a couple of points there. So I'm lucky I change my car quite regularly. And the previous one, it took 13 touches to turn it off, which probably isn't that safe. But why did I turn it off? Because I live in a 30-mile-an-hour road that the maps all think are 15, and it tells me to turn left at the end, and that no car has ever turned left at the end because there's a bollard there. So the mapping is completely wrong. I get in my car, it goes bing, 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 and I'm doing nothing wrong. So maybe that's wrong. I changed my car. The button that my wife used to turn on the heated seat is now the VSC button. So we get in and she turns off the VSC every time. But education.
Yeah, and I think that that's the feedback loop into the manufacturers that we as an insurer need to be, and everybody needs to be doing, because actually there should be a button that says update this feature, not turn it off. Update this feature, there's a bollard there, and then you don't have to turn it off.
That's mapping, not manufacturing, that one.
All right, thank you very much. I think we are about time now, and we have the next panel coming in a couple of minutes. So just let me thank you, the four of you, for this great panel, and thank you for everyone for joining this panel. And I'm wishing you a very nice day. Thank you.